Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Soul Food and Fuel for Your Life. My name is Kenton David Bell, and I am your host. We are going to continue the conversation around narcissistic energy and dynamics within a family, and I'm telling it from my own experience. Um, it's a kind of a non-linear story. I might go back and forth through different timelines at different times to illustrate what I'm talking about. And the purpose for this is twofold. One is there is something about myself. I'm feeling it's a cathartic process for me to talk about this publicly because usually there's so much shame, and I've carried the shame for so long in me. And now in my early 60s, I just can't carry it any longer. And it retards and limits so much of my life living in it. And it's so insidious. It's like a virus in a sense. I think it is somewhat of a virus, and I've heard it being described like that. And we all have narcissistic tendencies in us. So it's been shattering in my life, partly because I'm also very sensitive. Now, once again, as I stated in part one of this series, narcissistic aspects within us all, that I'm not a victim. This is all part of a greater plan, I believe, on a soul level. And that's where I'm going to start today. So back in the mid 90s, it was 1997, I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And instantly I was thrown into being full-blown psychic, clairvoyant, clairaudient. Within a week or two, I had, in the evenings, an Egyptian god. I didn't know it was an Egyptian god at the time. Since then, I've learned that it is, by the name of Thoth, show up in my living room and began to teach me at night. Sometimes he would teach me all night long into the next morning with no sleep at all. So it was a very, very intense period of time. And there are no coincidences. I'm kind of laughing with what I'm about to say next. I just so happened to live right across the street from a psychic institute called Asclepion. This is in San Rafael, California, just north of San Francisco. And I went there after, this thing was happening to me. I thought, well, maybe they can help me. And I took a couple classes there and had a couple readings that were very helpful. But what was really helpful is the founder, I think his name was John Fulton. Yeah, that was his name. And Asclepion was an offshoot, by the way, of Berkeley Psychic Institute. Some of you probably know that. They're fairly well known in that area and even across the country, I believe. So John Fulton told me in a reading, he said, I picked my mother so I could learn how to be self-centered in a healthy way. And I had really no idea what he meant then. And I had no idea about this narcissism that was in the family, except for my mom had talked about, now my mother being a narcissist, her father was a narcissist, and he was, kind of a malignant narcissist, more or less. He was cruel in many ways from the stories I heard. He was also very charismatic in many ways, just like my mother. Can be very charming and charismatic. Narcissists usually are. So I remember that time, when I look back on the clues. So I had therapy as well, where the therapist would, on a few occasions, different therapists would say, what did your mother do to you? And I would actually defend my mother to the therapist. And that's what happens. You see, you get kind of bamboozled. It's almost a brainwash. It literally is a brainwashing. It's a rewiring of your brain by the malignant narcissist kind of virus, really. And I believe that there's entities attached to this often as well. And so it gets in your system, and you are you're brainwashed into not really knowing the true truth of what's going on. Now, I think, once again, that narcissism is rampant in our world. We see it in politics. Guess who? It's pretty common knowledge. They talk about it on the mainstream news, calling him a narcissist, and all his base is basically, in many ways, victims of, I guess you could call it victims or subjects, and been infected with that virus. So I'd like to think that's starting to change. So let's see. So the therapist, I was defending my mother against my therapist, and they would drop it. Little did I know, I look back, I go, oh my God, I was so stupid. And boy, it just really something. And then John Fulton telling me about, he didn't use the word narcissist at all, but he said, you picked your mother so you could learn how to be self-centered in a healthy way. And I've always had trouble being self-centered in a healthy way. Now, if you ask my family, I'll bet anything that they would disagree with that. And once again, there's the imprinting of the narcissist. And I was, of course, the scapegoat and kicked out of the house. Both my parents were divorced, both remarried, and I was kicked out of both of them by my step-parents, who found me, the only thing I could think of it as, a threat. And so I left home at an early age of 15. And there was a lot of shame. The shame was so horrific all of my life. And they would, go on, they would have holidays together. And often I wasn't invited. Sometimes I was, often I wasn't. But like, for instance, one of the things that would happen when I was invited, I remember this one occasion. This happened more than once, but this is one that I remember because of the amount of shame and how mortified I was when it occurred. And it was in Hawaii, and we grew up in Hawaii, and it was around Christmas, and there was a gathering. We had some family friends over, and my stepdad and I, who really didn't get along, we were tolerating each other on that trip, I remember. And there was another couple, the Hikins, who were very close. They were almost like godparents to me and my other siblings in ways. Really great people. And we're sitting there talking, and my mother would start to mention like something, a couple of years in the past, and she'd look at me and say, "Oh, Kenton, remember when we did this, and this?" And I wasn't even there because I'd been kicked out of the house. And I would look at her, and I didn't know if, momentarily that shame would come up, and the sense of loss. And I had been literally not only kicked out of the family, but stonewalled and villainized in so many ways for nothing. Maybe acting out at times. I was angry, of course, as a child because of all this. But I never was given a chance to really heal it within the family, because the family wouldn't accept that because of the narcissistic virus and dynamic that ran the family. Still does in many ways. And I'd look at Mom and go, I didn't know what to say for a moment. I said, "Mom, I wasn't there." And then she'd kind of look at me like, "How dare you say that?" and kind of glance away and continue on. And like it didn't just happen. There was many incidences like this. And then I was also, there'd be other gatherings where I wouldn't be invited. And during these holiday periods at times when I was on my own, now, not always, but there were a number of times during the holidays where I was, not invited, and I would literally be so devastated and depressed and shamed. And, I would spend sometimes days in bed in the fetal position, really, because it was so devastating. It was incapacitating. And then my sister-in-law, my brother Kurt's wife, would send pictures of everybody together and, kind of almost rubbing salt into the wound. That happened. There was a period of time where that was happening on a regular basis for a number of years. And it was really, really bad. And then so when my mother and stepfather were married and we moved from Hawaii to California, And they put me in this back room in where we moved into my stepdad's house in the Valley, Reseda, Northridge area, California, in the Valley. And God, I remember they put me in back with one of my stepbrother, his son Larry. It was like it was just it was so bad. The room, and it was like it felt like we come from Hawaii, and we had a beautiful life there, and it was just so incredibly depressing, the energy, and I'm super sensitive to energy, always have been. And so I ran away that night. I just couldn't stand it. It was beyond what I could tolerate. And I ended up sleeping in the car, my stepdad's car, just down, out on the street. So I didn't even run away, really. They didn't know where I was. I came back the next day and said I couldn't live there. And part of me was grateful, and because it was so bad. Let's just say it. In my view, it was so bad. And so I moved in with my dad and stepmother. And I was kicked out of the house. I didn't choose that. But the story my mother told my brothers until just a few years ago, they believed I left on my own accord. My mother says she believes I left on my own accord. I did not. So the narcissist creates these stories. Whether they believe it or not, I'm not sure if she actually believed her lie, or if the lie, my sense is the lie is, and her, what she's done is too much for her to admit the truth about. That's the sense I get. And so my whole life then is based on really these lies from the family about who I am, which there was no there, except for the narcissistic virus that was creating these dynamics in the family. And my father was an angry man. He was very angry most of his life, and he was really hard on me. That's the truth. But by this time, he and I had kind of reconciled. He had softened. He had kind of a spiritual awakening, I would say. And so I lived with him and my stepmother for a while in California. And then we moved to Hawaii as well, but on a different island. They flew for Western Airlines. My father was a captain and she was a flight attendant. And we moved to Oahu, and so I was living with my dad and my stepmother there. And I thought things were going pretty well, really. I was in high school. I was enjoying it quite a bit. I was into acting in high school. I was really loving that. Girls were becoming a thing, and it was pretty nice. We lived in a nice neighborhood there, and it was a big high school, Castle High, in Kaneohe on the island of Oahu, large high school. And my dad and stepmom were going through some stuff. He had a vasectomy. He didn't want to have any more children, and she wanted to have children. And this is what my father told me. And she became resentful, apparently, towards me because she wanted to have her own children with my dad, and he refused to do it. So one day I came home, and Munya, my stepmother, had moved out. My dad was very, very upset. He didn't know what to do. So he and I talked about it quite a bit, and he said, I don't want to lose my marriage. And so we decided that I would go to boarding school. And that was devastating for me. I was actually having a really pretty good time there in high school and doing well and enjoying the acting and feeling creative and so on. So that happened, and there's a whole other story. That's another timeline that I could go into some other time. That's not relevant really to the story, I don't think, right now. And I'm just thinking there's a lot there, but we're not going to go into it right now. Well, there was some past life stuff there, I think, between my stepmother and I. Before that time, or before she she had left like that, we went on a trip together, my stepmother, my dad, and I, to Anchorage, Alaska for a couple days. They flew for the airline, so it was easy for us to do this. And I hadn't been in Alaska before. It's kind of funny because I ended up living there for 7 years later on. But I remember one day walking downtown Anchorage, and she turned and looked at me out of the blue and said, we have some karma from past life. And I didn't even know what the hell she meant right then. But that stuck with me always throughout this time. And what I think happened really was there was something I was carrying in my field that wasn't actually me that would trigger her from a past life. And I can get pictures of what that was. And I'm not going to go into that right now because it would sidetrack the story, I think, too much and get too convoluted. But I might talk about that, probably will at some other point. So then over the years, time goes on, blah, blah, blah. And I've tried to make amends with her on a number of occasions. Oh, yeah, there was one other incident I remember before she moved out and refused to come back home till I was gone. And they had a party. I think it was like a New Year's Eve party. And they said, Kenton, you can bring over some high school friends. So I did. And we kind of were downstairs. The party, the adults were upstairs. We were downstairs. And apparently there was some airline tickets stolen. And I think I know who did it. But my stepmother blamed me for it. And I had no idea at the time what the hell she was talking about. Over the years, I think it was this kid, kind of a friend of mine named Jerry from high school who took him. I'm certain of it, really. I don't have proof, but I'm quite certain. But I got blamed for it, and I told her, I didn't take him, and she wouldn't believe me. And so she had to create evidence to stonewall me, really, and kick me out of the house and to justify her actions. There was nothing really bad going on. I was, smoke a little pot here and there, but my parents, they all smoked pot. My dad had pot, but steal the pot from my parents, my dad or my mom usually. So, it was an influence that was around, and we were drinking a little bit too. My parents would be gone, on their trips. They would fly and they'd be gone for a couple of days, sometimes both at the same time. And literally the worst thing I ever did really was I did steal the key to the Mercedes off my dad's keychain. And I got the idea from my stepmom. She talked about when she was young, growing up in Phoenix, that she used to steal her parents' car. And so they'd be gone, and I'd drive the Mercedes to school sometimes. And boy, I can't believe I didn't get busted for that. That was like the worst thing ever I did. Not that bad considering what teenagers do overall. So now I've been, kicked out from both households, and the shadow projections of the narcissist onto me. And part of the reason for that, there's a couple of reasons for that, I believe, why I was so susceptible to this. And I came in with what's called a triple split. And if you look at human design and numerology, I'm here to the way my whole system's designed. Everybody's designed a little bit differently. And while we're all the same, we all have our uniqueness. And a triple split, like in the modality, the study, the body of information called human design, we have three different aspects of stuff. It's not schizophrenic or multiple personality, but it does have three distinct parts of us that don't always communicate with each other. And because of this, I think what it does is it first of all, it allows me to when I go into a healing session, I can triangulate in a way that allows me to see things that most people can't. Not only that, but also to help shift them. So that's a very positive aspect. But with the triple split, I'm also called a projector triple split. And the projectors are here to help usher in the new world. That's 20% of humans on the planet are projectors. And we're here for this time. occurring now, bringing in the new, ushering in the new. And because of that, we have a tendency to trigger others who have their shadow, who are not dealing with their shadow correctly. They project it onto people like us, and they'll get triggered. And so I think there was a lot of that going on with my stepmother. That's what I get now when I look back on it all. But because of this too, it's created. And currently, she just died, passed away a couple of weeks ago or a month ago or so. And I know that there was a lot of money in the inheritance that went to my two other brothers and not me. And my brother Kurt really did his best to villainize me too. I could look back over our conversations the last couple of years. Now, Kurt is not really a narcissist, but he is an empath, and he's been exposed to that. I call it the narcissistic virus, and it literally has changed his thinking. And due to I know this from the conversations we've had, that he's really tried to villainize me. And I keep asking him, Kurt, what are you doing? And it doesn't make any sense. We used to be pretty close, I thought. And so that was the work of both, I think, my mother but mostly my stepmother, Munia, who was also very narcissistic and completely unwilling to do any self-reflection or incapable of it, really. And everybody in my family knows it, but anyhow. So there I got, not only kicked out of the house, but cut off everything. It's a lot of betrayal, very, 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 very painful. And through the process, you learn how to, what I'm learning, my soul's learning in a very difficult way, is how to stand in my own power and authority. And that's what I'm here learning on a soul level. And so it's very, 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 it's been very, very painful. Now, since the last couple of years, I know that my mother is, I don't have proof of it yet, but I know it because of certain things have happened in my life recently. But she has, the narcissist, when they lose their scapegoat, they will start to basically talk trash, slander, and the other person. And it might be very subtle. Often the narcissist is very subtle. Like, oh, maybe it goes like this. I think Kenton maybe did it, or and it seems almost in passing. Or it could be much more of accusing of, heinous things that may, whether they're true or not, blown way out of proportion, and, it just magnified ridiculously without taking into account their part in it. Now, part of the reason I'm sharing all this is because I want all of you who are hearing this, whether you know me or not, just to kind of go through your own life and just look and see where you might be bumping up against this stuff. I do believe we're in a time where the narcissist can maybe heal now. The scapegoat empath, when they walk away, when they have the courage, like myself, to walk away, it's so the trauma bond is so strong. You have absolutely no idea how strong it is. Unless you've been through it. It's so insidious, so strong, that the whole family dynamic can't see it. And the individual, the scapegoat or the empath who literally breaks away, it takes so much energy, so much courage to do that. And you feel like you're betraying them, but really you're the one who's been betrayed. So it's any of you out there who are listening to this, who get a sense of what I'm talking about, please, whether you're the narcissist, and we all can have aspects of this, but whether you're the narcissist or the empath or the scapegoat, or what they also refer to as flying monkeys. The flying monkey is those who've been, unbeknownst to them, recruited by the narcissist to do their bidding. Great example is MAGA. Trump being the lead, the king narcissist, and those are all his flying monkeys. I know how aptly named. And they run around kind of in a blind rage, almost under a spell. Now that's how this all works. So when you notice this in your family, You have to discover where are you in that dynamic. And I highly recommend, especially if you're into healing and trying to evolve yourself as a spiritual human being, you can't really go forward. I have in many ways, but I have to come back here to address this in order to really move forward. You cannot go on the path of ascension, enlightenment, self realization without addressing this at some point. So I suggest go ahead and address it as soon as you can. I wish I addressed it a lot earlier because my life would have been very, very different. Once again, I'm not the victim here. This is life, and this is how it works. I'm not special, and I'm not the victim either. But I am a sovereign being wanting to live a life where my soul is free and I'm able to create my life the way I want to. I'm able to be in healthy relationships, which now I am for the first time in my life, I would say. And moving forward at 60. Fortunately, I think I have a lot of years left. The best years are to come. A lot of wisdom. I have a lot of ability to help others, which is what I love to do. So we're almost at 30 minutes. I'm going to keep this kind of at 30 minutes or below. So we're going to kind of wrap up now. And just go ahead and do some thinking about it. There's so much great stuff on YouTube now. Incredible resources on YouTube around narcissism. Really, really great stuff. There's a lot of professionals talking about it. There's also just common people like you and me who are not licensed professionals who've gone through a lot of this. One of the guys' name who I like a lot is Andrew Gilroy. And I've watched many, many hours on this and narcissistic dynamics and betrayal in the family unit. And I tell you, it is so worth doing the work. Do the work. Do yourself the favor. Or you could always come to me too. I'm not a professional in that, but I can absolutely help you get in touch with it, begin to clear it, and make some suggestions, in ways that you can also support yourself beyond just the work I do. Okay. I love you all very, very much, and there's nothing you can do about it. Have a wonderful day. I am Kenton David Bell, your host of Soul Food and Fuel for Your Life.